Nietzsche house that I showed you, and this is where they lived. Much of the writings and publications that were done at that time for other people about him and their friends, that's preserved in the little library in that house. Then at age 14, he went off to the finest prep school in all of Germany. Now, this is quite amazing because they weren't wealthy, and they were definitely not wealthy after the father died, but the father and the grandfather were very well connected in the overall Lutheran church, and so clearly they were friends of his father and his grandfather who were able to help him, and so he was admitted to this spectacular prep school. The building is still there, and the prep school is still there. Landschule Sforta, it's still there and still functioning and still one of the best prep schools. When we say prep school, we mean a special school you're admitted to, you have to make an application to. And in this case, obviously he was a very, very bright, very gifted young student who could apply, and based on his whatever exam he had to take, was admitted with full scholarship. Now, that was extraordinary. And when he finally takes a final examination in 1864, he is given a rare commendation as extraordinary. The field in which he graduated was Greek. So he's a teenager getting an extraordinary commendation on Greek before he ever goes to the university. So we can see at 14, his extraordinary boy, and well connected enough, not because of wealth, but because of his father, his grandfather, and their overall family that were Lutherans, and enough connections to enough people so that they knew how to do this. They knew how to apply. And that's, of course, what he had to do. So here he is, teenager, about to go off to the university. We have pictures of him all the way through his life. So in 1864, he's 20, and he will graduate from high school, from that prep school, and go to the University of Bonn, one of the great universities of Germany in the Rhineland, where he went for the purpose of studying theology. Now, this is easy to understand, of course, that from his family's point of view, he would go to the university and study theology. And so he did. Also, he wanted to study classical philology. That means Greek. You're studying Greek, and you're studying evolution of the Greek language, evolution of the words, the meaning of it, and then you study all the documents in ancient Greek that are important, Plato and Aristotle, and all the other important writers. After one semester, so halfway through the year, he drops out of theology. Now, of course, this is announced back home to his mother, and, of course, at home there is shock and upset, terrible, terrible. And then he announces that he has lost his faith. He's lost his Christian faith. And we can take this as a mark of this person who is living through the 19th century, who has gone off to university, 1864, 20 years old, is in one of the very best universities, went there thinking he would study theology, and now he gets to college, and all of a sudden he begins to doubt his family's Christian faith. Now, that's a story I bet everybody in this room knows about. Either it happened to you, or it happened to your roommate, or your friend, or your best friend, or your former best friend. But I bet every single person in this room has gone through these experiences. It's going on right this minute over at Stanford. That's exactly what they do. You arrive there with your faith, and it's all gone after the first semester. That's what they're dedicated to doing. That's what they want to do. Every professor at Stanford would like to divest you of whatever faith you had when you came in the door. One of the marks of this phenomenon was the publication of David Strauss's The Life of Jesus. Now, Strauss, German, liberal, Protestant, Lutheran theologian, produced this study of the historical Jesus, and it became an explosion in the middle of the century because Strauss went through every single episode that Christians knew, having read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and analyzed every single one from the point of view of an historian, Were they correct? Did they happen the way that they're said they do? Are there contradictions between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Yes, of course there are. Was there doubt about the exact date of birth, the exact date of... Yes, there were. And so when he was finished, even though he apparently was writing the life of Jesus from the point of view of a Christian, the fact was that the book and then all the other books that followed, there were dozens of other books that did exactly the same thing, but we can use the Strauss Life of Jesus as the mark of what was happening in the middle of the 19th century. And of course, what was happening was that as the scientific historians applied their attention to the life of Jesus and then the life of Paul and all the rest of the figures in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, once they began to apply their critical thinking to these stories, they suddenly discovered that there were discrepancies, that Matthew and Mark didn't agree on this and they didn't agree on that. And so what was unleashed was a new critical look at the Christian faith, at all the basics of the Christian faith. And here was this 20-year-old in college suddenly being exposed to all of this. He had grown up in a faithful family. He had been going to church with his father and being proud of his father every Sunday. I'm sure the whole family was proud of his father. And so now all of a sudden, he's 20, he's on his own, he's at college, and he comes across the historical search for the historical Jesus. And he was shaken to his core, and therefore he was left abjuring and announcing to his family he had encountered a little bit of historical research here, and there were some discrepancies, and so that was it. Couldn't believe anymore, and that's the key event in his life. That's the key. He never comes back. He's 20. It's 1864, and he's going to change everything in his life forever. A lot of people have done the same thing, so there's no surprise. But in 1850, it was a surprise. In 1850 and 1860, it was a big surprise. For him, it's 1864. If we look at Europe, if we look at the different countries, they're all in a little different situation than, say, northern Germany. Lutheran Germany, which is the northern half, would have been the most productive of books and research like we're describing, because in 1850 they already had a 300-year tradition of following in Luther's footsteps, which was a questioning one. If you turn to Roman Catholic France or Roman Catholic Spain, you don't see this, because in both cases the dominant Roman Catholic Church is successful in taking control and keeping control generally of the overall religious atmosphere, and even more so in Papal Italy. The other country where there would be lots of publication and thinking is Anglican Britain, because Britain was essentially Protestant. Britain had followed Luther. When Henry VIII created the Anglican Church, he was essentially being motivated by Luther. He didn't know it, but his Archbishop of Canterbury knew it, and they were pushing Henry to create an independent church, which would eventually be a Lutheran kind of church. And then Tsarist Russia was completely isolated and detached from European intellectual trends. Nietzsche's world, the German world, would be the most productive of some of this doubt and some of this thinking, and in a sense, unprepared for the assault. So whichever one of these national traditions we might look at, they're all equally unprepared for this kind of historical critique. They've never experienced it before. There is the beginning of it in the previous century before the French Revolution. You can see little critiques from people like Rousseau and Diderot in Enlightenment France, but small essays and such. But then Revolution, Napoleon, post-Napoleonic Europe, huge industrial success and growth, immense growth, and the immense growth of the press. We should throw that in. That's what's going to change this general intellectual debate and the atmosphere over the faith, because the press, and we don't mean just newspapers, but we start with newspapers, went through an extraordinary growth in the 19th century. London at the peak had 20 major newspapers. selling thousands and thousands and thousands of copies every single day. Imagine in one big city, 20 major newspapers. And the turn of the century, 1900, that's the state. And then there were dozens and dozens of weekly magazines. And they were all looking for articles and stories that they could publish, whether it was medical information or how to buy this or how to buy that or how to use your corn or whatever it was. They were all looking for subjects to cover. And so there was a vast amount of publication on health issues and religion. A lot of editors loved articles on religion. So the existence of this sudden new publication world, newspapers and magazines, and dramatic increase in literacy. So the number of people who could buy the paper or the magazine and read the article by David Strauss or someone else about contradictions between Matthew and Mark were dramatically increased. And so not only was there the questioning, but there was the ability for that to circulate among the general population. And so that's the state of affairs when Nietzsche at 20 goes off to college, goes to the University of Bonn, and discovers that, oh my goodness, there are doubts about which exact city Jesus went to first. So suddenly, oh my goodness, no, he didn't go to this city first, he went to the other one. Here's in 1865, so he's in the academic year, 64, 65, and at 20 he wrote to his sister Elizabeth, who of course was still deeply religious and would stay so for her life, a letter regarding his loss of his Christian faith. And here's how the letter ends. So, hence, the ways of men part, meaning him and her. If you wish to strive for peace of soul and pleasure, then go on believing. But if you wish to be a devotee of truth, then inquire. Come with me, obviously. Come with me. Get out of the church and come inquire with me. Now, that didn't break their relationship, but it certainly upset her and everybody else in the family, and he knew it would. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was not a frightened university boy who didn't dare tell his parents what he was doing. He was not afraid of his sister and told her.